afternoon, everybody. Hello, Hans.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Mandela Space Ventures. We're so thrilled to have you here in front of a live audience of folks from Mandela Space Ventures, and pretty good group of people, I believe, online. And we had at least a few hundred people register for this event. So a lot of interest, a lot of excitement.
Lots of pressure.
Lots of pressure. And so we have one rule here, and that is to have fun.
Okay.
And talk to you and enjoy this event. This is the second of our virtual space forums. We had Jason Rhodes back in the spring of this year, an astrophysicist, cosmologist from JPL who did an amazing job. And we're delighted to have you here, Hans Koenigsmann. Did I pronounce that right in German?
Mostly, yeah.
Koenigsmann. And as you mentioned in a number of different interviews and so on, you were technical employee number 4
Yes.
at SpaceX. So before I jump into questions and introducing you and so on, I just also wanted to thank everybody here at Mandela and at Continuum, and just share with everybody that yesterday we had some good news that Mandela was selected by the Canadian Space Agency as the accelerator of choice for their next cohort. So we're very proud to be in that group with the Canadian Space Agency. And today, proud to welcome you here. And I'll just start by kind of looking at Hans today. Can you just share with us a little bit? I know you retired from SpaceX 2 years ago, roughly in 2021. But what are you doing today? What's Hans doing today?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me here. Of course, I'm looking forward to our talk. And today, what do I do today? Well, I'm on the board for 2 companies. One of them is it's OHB. It's a larger satellite company in Germany. And the second one is a smaller company, startup called Mynaric, working on lasercom. And then I'm advising more actively a couple of companies, particularly the one that I enjoy, Stoke in Seattle. Stoke is working on a reusable launch vehicle, and then VAST in Long Beach. VAST is working on a commercial space station. And then I'm also volunteering for the National Academy. And then I'm also having fun on the side beyond those ventures. Wonderful.
And so you retired 2 years ago from SpaceX, and obviously you look great. You look like you have a lot of energy, a lot of capacity. What was your kind of outlook for yourself? I mean, you're not golfing every day. You're not going snorkeling. You're not the what
I do go snorkeling. Yeah. So I think I worked 19 and a half years at SpaceX, and before I completely left SpaceX, I actually worked half a year as an advisor, stepped down basically, and went half time. And in that half time, I ended up building a experimental airplane. So I would work like half the week on the experimental airplane and half the week at SpaceX. And so my idea was also, when I stop this completely, then I can just fly around and have fun too, right?
So hobbies.
Yeah, hobbies. I mean, partly it's also I need to figure out a little bit myself of what I really want and what is the most joy for me and the most useful thing for me going forward. I'm still working with a lot of companies because I do have some, I guess, knowledge maybe, and experience, and I know this is perishable. So I basically got to hurry up on that before I get obsolete and forget all my things too, right? And then, so what I will do probably is shift over time more and more from being active in companies to being less active and whatever, travel more, do more of the things that I like to do.
And what about, I mean, one thing that I find to be very rewarding is to kind of mentor the next generation of engineers and leaders like you are doing, I'm sure, with Stoke and and VAST and others.
It's Silk and Rust, and I do. It's thanks for mentioning that. I'm also mentor for the Isakowitz.
Oh, that's right.
I think it's called Foundation, right?
Yes, Matthew Isakowitz.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a mentee for this year, which was fun. I'm going to have a mentee next year. I think he's doing a great thing there. And something like that should be done more often, definitely. But I do enjoy that. And then we meet once a year and have, I think, lunch or dinner and exchange a little bit on how things are going. So I think I do like the mentoring. It's a little bit hit or miss to some extent. Sometimes you on the same wavelength, and sometimes it doesn't quite work out. So it depends on how that goes too.
Yeah, just so you know, I've known Steve Isakowitz for many years, and Mandala Space Ventures has recently also applied to be part of the program. So we're hoping to also mentor the fellows from
as a company.
Yes,
that's
as
great.
a company.
That's
And
great.
so we clearly believe in giving back and mentoring and teaching the next generation. And certainly you have so much to offer to the next generation.
I do get a lot of I mean, I get occasionally, I would say, phone calls from people from former SpaceX or still SpaceX, and they want to know what to do in certain and I do in a certain situation, and I do enjoy helping them if that happens.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned OHB, you mentioned Minaric, which is a publicly traded German company. Do you have a drawback into mentoring and helping the ecosystem in Germany? Is that something that takes you back to your roots, or what is your?
I think it's a little bit coincidence. I would do this here as well as there. I don't think it matters to me where it is. In fact, it's a little bit harder for me to do in Germany because occasionally I have to get up at 5 a.m. But I think I'm pretty neutral to that. I live here. That's my home. LA basically is my home. But I do have more time to visit Germany too, right, and other places.
Very good. So now let's kind of get into some details of your career. I did a lot of reading about your some interviews you gave in the past and so on. And rather than following the more traditional approach of, where you got your PhD, how you got to SpaceX, which we'll get to in a few minutes, I wanted to kind of just set up like a view from, you mentioned 19 and a half years, let's just call it 20 years, from 2002 to 2021. When you look at the SpaceX website today, which by the way is, whoever did it is a great website, it lists beautifully the verticals. You have Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, Starship, the launch vehicles. You have the Dragon, human spaceflight, rideshare, Starshield, and Starlink. These are 8 kind of business verticals. When you look at that, you started in SpaceX in 2002. 20 years later, it is just amazing what's out there. And so, I would expect that you could not have imagined that when you joined SpaceX, but 20 years is not all that much time in the history.
It's not.
In 20 years, you were part, all due credit to Elon Musk and Gwen and Tom Mueller and others, but you were part of this core team of the first, call it 10, that really built an amazing company. And I just want to get your kind of perspective on the overall from 2002 to 2021 when you left. Just look at this entity that you're part of, and just how do you look at that?
So certain things always resonated with me and made a lot of sense. It's like, you talk to a new boss and then they tell you 15 things and you agree with probably 7.5, and you kind of maybe a little bit skeptical about the other 7.5. Yeah, but most of the stuff that we did in SpaceX, or even early on, was stuff that makes sense right away. Yeah, like I don't know. We want to start with the engine right away. It's the hard part, right? Start with the hard part. Don't push the can down the road. Just start early as you can and prioritize that basically. And that totally made sense to me. And there were a couple others like that. The vertical integration of the company basically try to buy something, but if you can't buy it, build it yourself, right? And you end up basically building yourself a lot to some extent. And also on the hiring front, we did not compromise on the hiring, with my exception, of course. But we were really thinking long term, basically, and that kind of resonated with me very much.
But are you saying that from the beginning there was this vision of all these different verticals? That was.
I don't think it was that vision per se, but it was always like when decisions were always like, long term, this is going to help us this way, so let's do the hard way. Yeah, let's not go the. It's not totally true. In some cases, we actually did like whatever, bought something first because it was easier, and then intended to build it later. Yeah. In other cases, we said, in most cases, we said, let's build it right away because it's strategic, it's critical, you got to do it. And so it wasn't easy in that sense, but it was certainly logical for me, and in the long run, also the right decision.
You know, it's interesting. I found that there are two different schools of thought. As you mentioned, being vertically integrated,
right,
it reduces risk, it reduces the dependency on supply chain, but not everybody can afford doing vertical integration. Many times you're in a situation where you say, oh, these guys are building engines, or these guys are building avionics. Let's just buy from others. But you were able to, SpaceX, to actually stay vertically integrated.
I don't think it's a matter of affordability, frankly. It's a matter of like how much work you want to put on yourself, right? And so we were kind of, I guess, brave in that sense.
Okay.
That we took on a lot of work for ourselves, and we made some of these compromises. Let's buy the first part too, in a few cases, yeah. But I feel like this is more like a matter of strategic planning, in my opinion, and not necessarily affordability or capability.
Okay. I wanted to bring up the whole, when again looking at the big picture. In 20 years, SpaceX is, I mean, this whole discussion is supposed to be from a garage, a startup in a garage, to world dominance, which is just, again, remarkable. And as I shared with you a little bit earlier, about 6 years ago, I hosted, while at JPL, Professor Hans-Jörg Dittus, whom I found out was your boss in Zerm, with a group of 5 members of the parliament in Germany, the Bundestag. They were left, right, center, green. They were here with Hans-Jörg Dittus visiting JPL and SpaceX, and you were their point of contact. They were struggling with the notion, how come SpaceX can happen in the United States, in particular SoCal, and why can't it happen in Germany or Europe? And share with us what you can, in general opinion.
Right.
Is there something unique about the United States and SoCal when it comes to aerospace defense that the others don't have? Is it right that can happen here and not there? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, there's more energy here. There's more people that are competent here. There's more money here at the end of the day, and that's kind of what, if you put these things together, and then there's a little bit more a different spirit. Like there's a spirit of we can do this, right? And we have examples around us that actually show that, right? I mean, there's JPL, and there's other companies that did that, and so so I can see that inspires you too, right? I mean, NASA and all these companies are inspiring today even more than 20 years ago, right? But I can see that the inspiration, the financing obviously is important, and then the having just lots of engineers around is just super. It's just a mix that you need to pull this together, shake it, and make a good cocktail out of that. But in that sense, going all the way back. Can you do this in Germany? I think there's things that start changing in Germany too. The financing starts to change, but then there's also a lot more regulations than here. It's hard to believe, I know, I think a little bit more of the optimism that is here needs to transfer over there too. Yes. So
and it's happening.
It's happening, yes, yeah. But it's slow and it's starting up, you know, in different areas basically. But I'm curious about, you know, watching that and if I can, you know, maybe helping it and just generally I'm just curious on how this whole thing develops. Now, what you say about SpaceX and you said earlier the dominant force, basically, right? Mm-hmm. I found that also very interesting because at the end of the day, SpaceX just grew and did good work, I think, and developed, and the rest of the industry just stayed where it was. That's all that happened, right? So it's not what some people say it's a monopoly. That's totally not true. You can still buy a rocket for 3 times more money. You can, but it's just you know, you wouldn't do this, right? So I find that the term monopoly for me is just an excuse of people that got stuck basically in the way they were and didn't innovate their product, rather than what SpaceX did is just continuous innovation and make the product cheaper and better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to share with you when this group visited us 5-6 years ago, one of the answers that I gave them at the time, and with you know, I didn't study this phenomenon, I didn't study what's going on in Germany or Europe, but I did observe from JPL that NASA, so at the level of the federal government, federal agency, NASA was very much on the path of commercializing space. At NASA headquarters, at the federal government, the whole pathway of commercializing, and NASA, and I've written about this in some of our some papers, that NASA was looking at innovative public-private partnerships. You had the COTS program that SpaceX benefited significantly from. You have the human lander system, you have CLIPS, you have Gateway. So NASA really, and this is what I shared with the Germans, members of parliament, the space agency was eager to open up the landscape, the competitive landscape. You had the ULA at the time. They explicitly were making room for rising stars like SpaceX. So it wasn't all that kind of serendipitous. There was some clever planning and some gutsy moves at the level of NASA, the DoD, and so on, just for the sake of doing what happened, which is to enable commercial enterprises to provide services to NASA. My opinion is that this is one of the things that SpaceX clearly did well in.
Right, but the partnership was, like you say, it was a partnership. It was it required investment from the industry too.
Yeah.
So SpaceX was certainly in the right place and also had the right mindset to invest some of the money themselves, basically.
Yes.
Some of the conventional industries did not quite see, coming from like cost plus, basically, right?
Yes.
I did not quite see why should we suddenly invest in that, right? We can get it, you know, otherwise paid for. So there was certainly a shift in paradigm for NASA and how they cooperated with industry. And I must also say that I do admire people at NASA who took the risk to work on those programs, because for their careers, I mean, that was obviously a big step for them too, right? This could have gone wrong too, right?
Who do you recall, let's say from the NASA program managers or leaders did you interact?
I mean, there's people like Kathy Lueders, Alan Lindmoyer, Phil McAllister. I'm pretty sure I forget something if I mention there. I shouldn't have started doing that. But there's actually a lot of people that and then there's people that were skeptical in the beginning, and then over time we convinced them that, you know, we're actually good engineers, right? And we truly want these missions to succeed. Yeah, and they have a slightly different mindset than some of the other industries. So it took a while, but I think we convinced a lot of people that this is a good thing to do. And part of that is also that you saw a continuation, you saw the crew program and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Right, COTS was so cargo is still going. So I think for SpaceX and NASA, this all worked very well. For others, it didn't always work that well, as far as I can see.
So what you're saying is it wasn't only, let's say, top-down planning from
Correct.
NASA. There was a strategy on the SpaceX side to buy in, to co-invest, in order to differentiate yourselves from the others.
I think it was, yeah, I'm not sure these things are always really carefully planned, but it was a good coincidence and a good fit with SpaceX is what I would say, yeah. And we realized that that's something that we could work with, like, in the long run.
But would you agree that NASA played a big role?
Oh, totally. NASA was absolutely crucial for SpaceX's success. Absolutely.
And sorry if I haven't followed the latest, you ended up hiring, or SpaceX ended up hiring Gerstenmaier into SpaceX, and you overlapped for about a year.
We did. So I think I was what you would call instrumental for that. I early on had the vision that Gerstenmaier would be a great successor for me, which seems a little bit weird because he's a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
But he has good energy, and we had a very good agreement in terms of what we wanted to do. And excuse me, because I need potential spam. No, so anyways, Gerstenmaier was really great for SpaceX, in my opinion.
It's a little bit interesting or strange that you had like one of your program managers at NASA retire and then join SpaceX.
Right, there's regulations and everything, and you need to have a cool off.
Yes.
And so on and so forth. You need to consider that always. Mm-hmm.
But I remember when I was reading that, I thought, wow, what a fabulous move. Somebody who is so informed, a leader from the NASA community who understands the business, the core of the business, coming to SpaceX. That was just a brilliant move.
Right, there's not too much crossover between NASA and SpaceX in general, or between government and SpaceX in general, but there's a few, and there are always the few that make the transition are instrumental.
Wonderful, wonderful. So now we're kind of looked at SpaceX from 20 years, and
you can look at SpaceX 20 years from now on, right?
That is on my list. That is on my list. We're getting there.
Okay.
But I wanted to kind of take you back to the garage.
All right.
Okay, we went SpaceX 20 years since you started in 2002. Now let's go to the garage. And I read some of your prior interviews, and I love the fact that one of the NASA historians that quoted you as saying that you worked hard and you played hard.
Right.
Tell us about the play hard. Whatever you can.
It's not that bad. I mean, I don't know. There's this famous mariachi band picture, right?
Yeah.
That's one of those. We had Christmas parties that were pretty good.
Okay.
And more energetic than other Christmas parties.
So who's the party leader? Was it Elon? Was it Gwen?
I think Elon. I think it's Elon's idea, and then the party implementation as the main part. That's been for many years Elon's assistants or Gwen assistants, basically. And then yeah, I mean they should get the credit for all the parties, in my opinion. I remember one party in Hawthorne where we got couple of truckloads snow for the Christmas party, right? I mean, it's kind of fitting,
yeah.
Although a little bit
in Hawthorne.
In Hawthorne, yes, a little bit unusual. So, but it was always cool. It was always fun. And it's also, I mean, it's the same. The people are pretty similar to some extent. They're relatively young in general, and they're highly energetic. And then you put those people in the room and put like a box of beer in the corner, and it goes on itself, basically.
Very good. So do you feel like the first team, call it the first 10, 20 people, that was a uniquely kind of a group that got along well, that you really worked well together.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about just that whole period.
I think what so Elon hired we were roughly all about 40, what you call that, mid-career?
Yeah.
Yeah, mid-career people that are still curious and had some experience basically in hopefully in unique projects, yeah, and then still some energy to build things up and but a different mindset, not necessarily. Here's what happens when you hire somebody from a certain company, that person, whether they want this or not, know the way of the old company. And in many cases, they pick the way of the old company. And it's just a subconscious thing too, right? I know I did this way, and well, for me now it's SpaceX way, right? It's SpaceX, we used to do it this way, so I'm just going to do it the SpaceX way, right? And it's not necessarily that I think about this, but people tend to do this. Yeah? So it's difficult if you hire, 5 mid-career people from Boeing, and then the whole thing looks a little bit like going. That is no surprise to me, right? That's kind of what you expected to happen. But if you hire people from small companies, and I don't know, you got to mix things up a little bit, right? And they need to be open enough so that you can actually implement your own processes and your own ideas in order to make a change. Right. Yeah. If you same is true if you hire 5 people from JPL, probably you get it the JPL way, and so. In number one, you want to mix it up, and I think the 5 of us were sufficiently different from each other to challenge each other, but we were sufficiently similar to like each other and cooperate. It was a very good group in terms of, we actually worked together. We tried to figure out what the other person needed first from your team, and then we started building up the teams. Basically, in about half the time, I would say, was building up the team. And the other half was what I would call technical work. So you got 40 hours this and 40 hours that, pretty much in the beginning. And they were all really good people. And I think I still most of them now. I mean, there's Gwyn obviously came a couple of weeks after me. Tim Buzzer, VP launch, came shortly after me. And before me, the 2 people that was already there, or 3 rather, is obviously Elon and Tom Mueller, and Chris Thompson. And I haven't worked with Tom Mueller. We heard from each other a little bit, but I did work with Chris Thompson earlier here at Blastoff in Pasadena, actually. We'll get to Blastoff in a minute. Okay. But both Gwyn and you came from Microcosm. Correct. Gwyn, so I got I obviously started in Germany, right? Yeah. I worked at the company there, at an institute rather at the university called SARM, although we were not very academic, to be honest. I was at a small team building a satellite. We flew the satellite on the shuttle. It was a little bit back and forth because we delivered it. There was a problem on the deploy mechanism. We delivered it back and it came back forward again. And then the person who deployed it at the end was Charlie Bolden. Wow. It's like a small world, yeah. Do you remember the year? Was that 95? That was 90, I want to say 93. Wow, that early. Yeah. It was 93, and the shuttle, I think it was STS 651, 61. What's the one with the wake shield? I think STS 60, at least from what I found. Maybe it was 60. Yeah, okay, thank you. Between 59 and 61. Yes, okay. We'll pick 60. It was the one with wake shield. I still have the sticker. But where was I going with that? Well, I was asking you, both Gwyn and you came from Microcosm. Right. And then I hired, then Microcosm hired me over here on a work visa. And this whole thing was supposed to be 2 years. And I thought that's great. Actually, the person really behind that was my wife, because she wanted to she wanted to live here. Okay. Yeah. And I was just a vehicle. And so we decided to move over here for 2 years. The only problem was we actually liked it after 2 years. We liked it more than the idea of going back, and we extended it. It became 5 years, and then I got the green card, and then SpaceX happened, and then the rest, is history. But so Gwyn was my manager at Microcosm, because my previous manager that was Rex Eisenhower, and he left. He wanted to found his own company.
Yes.
And then we looked for a manager, and then there was Gwyn, and she worked at the Aerospace Corporation and was trying to get back to industry at that time. And so Gwyn became my manager, and I was the chief scientist or something like that at Microcosm, and we worked a couple of years together before I then left to SpaceX, and then she followed a couple of weeks
So
later.
just so you know, as I researched your background, I found a few places that our paths may have crossed. I don't know exactly, but Gwen Shotwell and her team visited my lab and my center at JPL roughly around that time. That's when I first met Gwen Shotwell. She was not Shotwell at that point, and had a different last name. But so you may have come to JPL with Gwen. That was in the late 90s. But anyway, she remembers it, and I remember it. That she.
So you both remember it, but I don't. Okay. I've been a couple of times to JPL, so I wouldn't be surprised if that if we cross paths there.
And now let's jump to Blastoff for a moment, because Blastoff is pretty iconic. It came out of Idea Lab, Bill Gross's venture studio, much like Mandela Space Ventures. And we have mutual friends in Tom Switek, and Tony Spear was the kind of worked on Blastoff as the project manager for a while, Peter Diamandis. And there were a whole bunch of JPLers who were just rushing to that project.
Steve Bailey?
Steve Bailey, yes. The brother Bailey, Steve Bailey, and a bunch of others, Leslie Livesey, and a number of other people were all working on Blastoff for while it lasted. So that seems like an exciting precursor. For me,
it was interesting. I had a good relationship. I'm still friends with Tom Switek.
Okay.
And so we I like the idea of doing something commercial. It was my first venture into the commercial world, outside of what I did with Microcosm, and I was still working for Microcosm, but leased out, basically. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the energy there. I was in charge of the GNC and the landing, actually, and I had a team. I do remember Mark Krebs, and there was somebody else too. I don't remember his name right now. Ah, shit. Sorry.
No censorship.
I remember the 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure. But anyways, that team was better than me. Yeah, and so I learned a lot from that team in terms of GNC. And try to pull it together and keep the whole thing moving, basically within this very active and very fast moving satellite development that we had.
And it was supposed to be a lunar
exactly.
mission.
It was supposed to be a lunar lander.
Yes.
It was very serious. They actually, I think they procured the rocket actually already. We had several design iterations. We worked pretty intensively for like a year, maybe.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, we got hit by the .com.
That's right.
.com bust, and got shut down by that. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because then I still had time for SpaceX, right?
Yes.
Because I also remember I was driving up and down here to JPL. I spent probably, I don't know, years of my life on the road for that, and it was a very, very intense period. So. Also, I ran into Chris Thompson there.
Okay.
And then obviously that was very instrumental for getting to know Elon later and getting into SpaceX, basically.
Wonderful. It certainly was ahead of its time, and it was a venture-backed project. Bill Gross, Idea Lab, and so on. So it was clearly an amazing ahead of its time vision, and then it's kind of too bad that it didn't.
A couple of years later, it would have probably worked. I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Wonderful. So now switching a little bit again in your career path, the Falcon 1 is iconic in many ways, and in a way, it's showing how hard it is to get into this business. You have to build in. I don't like using the word failure, even though people apply to it. I want to share with you what I've learned from Charles Zelachi, who used to be the director of JPL, who basically would tell everybody that if a mission doesn't succeed, but you have learned lessons, that's not a failure. Failure is if it doesn't succeed and you didn't learn anything. So in the case of the Falcon 1s, there were 3 attempts. And tell us a little bit about the lessons learned, because in a way they were stepping stones on the path to a successful
So
launch.
I think actually you can succeed and not learn anything. You can fail and not learn anything. You can succeed and learn something, and you can fail and learn something, right? I think fundamentally the odds are higher if you fail that you learn something.
That's right.
But you can still learn and not learn in either one of those cases. They're not necessarily.
Well, I like your statement. You can succeed but not learn anything.
Totally. I mean, fundamentally, if you repeat something, right, it will be called success, but you haven't learned anything because you knew it already. So clearly, and the hard.
So which was it?
On Falcon 1, we did not succeed, and we learned. Well, we did succeed eventually, but it's a philosophical thing. Like there's this cliff. Like when you push technology, at one point you're going to fall off the cliff. But where's the cliff, right? And if you didn't fail, you can argue you haven't pushed hard enough. Yeah. And then obviously, if you fail, you can argue that you failed. You pushed too hard. So it's really hard to find that particular cliff where you learn the most, but don't fail the mission. Yeah. So on Falcon 1, the first flight failed. I think we weren't just ready. We had some operational issues. We didn't have reliable components. We made some mistakes along the way. We left the vehicle outside, and all these different things contributed. The official failure was a corrosion cracked V-nut, I think, that had a fuel leak, and then the fuel leak would just cause a fire at the wrong spot in the engine. I always say this. There's this. I can show the picture actually.
Yeah. Why don't you do that?
Let's see if I. So.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah,
Where'd it go?
No, it's.
Is it? I don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
We need the Emma here.
So basically, when we had a fuel leak, and then we took off. Obviously, the engine ignites, and then it ignited the fuel leak, and it burned through a couple of pneumatic lines, I think, or something like that.
That was the Falcon first launch.
Falcon first launch. And so after a while, we lost power, valves close, engine shuts down. Vehicle is about a mile or so up. It's like it ran for 28 seconds, and then comes down again. Rockets don't go much forward in 28 seconds. They go mostly up.
Yes.
So we came maybe 100 yards forward. We hit the launch site, but since it was really underwater, we hit the reef basically. Okay. And it was pretty traumatic for me, at least, because I up to then my only other big project was the satellite in Bremsat, and was more than successful. And you got it. Thank you. Oh, there it is. Okay, let's just go through here. This is the picture. It's actually on the book that I had as a reference. And when you look closely, you can see. Okay, there's obviously the big flame, right? And then there's a little flame above that.
Yes.
And that's the flame that's not supposed to be there.
Okay.
So it's very subtle in the picture, yeah. But I do like it there. And then the consequence of that was, let me just go there, was the lower right picture here, right?
Wow. This is all the debris?
Yes, because it hit the reef, basically, we had to wait for low tide, and then we picked it up.
Wow.
And then there was a lot of attempt of organization around this, but at the end of the day, we just put it on a spot in the hangar where we thought the part came from. So what you see there is basically the top of the rocket. What you see on the other side is the end of the rocket.
So you actually tried to reconstruct the rocket from the debris?
Pieces are not very big, yeah. But yes, we did. Yeah. I mean, this particular case, we knew what happened prior to that. So this is not like an accident investigation thing here. Only we tried to find the evidence, and we couldn't find then, of course, that particular that particular BNet.
So on that first launch, you were in charge of the avionics.
I was avionics, and that included avionics included more than just the electronic. It was guidance and control, it was flight termination, and it was software, actually, flight software.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then came flight 2.
Flight 2 was a little bit, I don't think I have a picture of that. I have a picture of the rocket on flight 2, the right one, I think is.
This is flight 2?
Yeah. You see a little bit. So the story is also, we launched from an island in the Pacific, and we got there. That's a little bit longer story, but we
Who took that picture?
A helicopter.
Okay.
In the range, it's the Kwajalein range. The atoll is called Kwajalein, so it's called it's an army base, and the island that we got within the atoll is called Omelek.
Okay.
So atoll is just like a lot of islands and mostly a reef, and this one is really big. This one is I think it's 100 by 60 miles or something like that. Yeah, the main island is called Kwajalein. Omelek is 20 miles from Kwajalein. Ironically, that almost matches my commute here at that time. And ironically,
by
the
boat,
time,
right?
Yes, but the time was almost the same too. So I was thinking on the boat, I got the same commute, same time, a little bit prettier, but still. In hindsight, I think there were good parts on being there, and there was mostly we could basically fly these rockets. Nobody cared too much about whether we failed or succeeded. Yeah, and in that environment, you can actually do that and don't get criticized for your failures or whatever it is. Yeah, even if they're not necessarily failures. Yeah, nowadays that's difficult. If SpaceX launches from Boca or from the Cape, doesn't matter, right? There's a million people watching it, right, and they all have opinions on what happens right away.
They all have cameras.
They all have cameras, and they all know exactly what's going on. So it's a totally different environment, and I felt in retrospect, this environment was actually good in the beginning.
So these were first 3 launches from the Marshall Islands.
All Falcon 1 launches came
from Falcon 1
from the Marshall Islands. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Marshall Islands are the country basically.
Right.
That Kwajalein is part of.
So including the successful launch was here.
Including the 2 successful launches, yeah.
Wonderful.
Flight 4 and Flight 5.
And when did you transition your role from being avionics, GNC, software, into the flight mission assurance?
Right? I think this came after Falcon 1, basically. I got a little bit stuck with Falcon 1, and part of what you need in this business is also persistence, and I'm pretty persistent, or high inertia, whatever you call it. Yeah. Maybe too high inertia sometimes, but I got stuck with Falcon 1. I just wanted to get this done, and so the Falcon 9 development happened on the side. It started earlier, and I didn't pay that much attention to it as I probably should have. Yeah, okay. But on the other side, I wanted to finish Falcon 1 definitely.
And today, Falcon 9 is a star performer, right? It is just
Correct.
dominating the launch vehicle business in a huge way. So congratulations to you and SpaceX
and the team. Yeah.
The team, and tell us a little bit more about that, your role on Falcon 9.
So my role was in the beginning, I think I kept guidance and control and flight termination, but the hard part was really flight termination actually. Okay. It's a little bit of a regulatory thing. Every rocket has to have a safety device that basically blows it up when things go wrong, right? Because there's nobody on board, and nobody would just fly another way. And I think it's like a lot of history, what happened with old rockets, and then they went somewhere, and you don't want to do that. I feel like the rules for that were a little bit too conservative in many cases. And there's all different types of rockets. There's solid boosters that really don't stop boosting, yeah. And then there's the liquid rockets like Falcon 9 that are actually difficult to change the course on. They tend to break up and you move them left or right. And so that tendency, I think, gets underestimated, and they're all in one big category that's basically rockets, whether they're solid or liquid, right? And I think over time we worked got more proper regulations, I think, on the Falcon 9 side. But in the beginning, it was just basically a charge on the side of the rocket and some electronics that allowed somebody to push a button on the ground, and then the rocket blows
Somebody
up.
from
The range.
SpaceX?
No, somebody from the range.
Okay.
The range has the ultimate key to that.
Now, did they have the same on Starship?
On Starship, it's different. That Starship doesn't launch from a federal range, right?
Okay.
So in this case, the FAA has the authority, and the FAA basically needs to certify, I guess, both the operator, the hardware, and the whole architecture of that system.
So forgive me if I'm I'm not an expert on that, but in the second launch of the Starship, it looked like it could have been done earlier than it was. It kind of flipped.
Yeah, it looked, and to my point, it also broke, I think, apart in the end anyways. So it's not totally clear to me, not totally clear what happened, simply because I don't have the data.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear to me what happened and how much of that was an action or a vehicle breaking apart.
Yeah, it just seemed from an observer like myself, that it went a little bit too long. It was clear when it was flipping around that something was definitely not
going the wrong direction, literally. Literally, yeah.
That was a little bit of a scary moment there.
I mean, nowadays those systems are autonomous, yeah, and they eliminated the human element out of that. I think that's a good idea, but it's also harsh in a way, right? I mean, and I guess the rules are based on what's called an impact point. So as you fly along, you have a projected impact point, and if that impact point is like outside of a certain range, then the autonomous system just terminates the vehicle. Okay. And termination could mean different things too. It could be just pull the plug on the engines, or it could mean blow it up, basically, depending on what the vehicle.
So you're saying on the Starship, it didn't go outside of that envelope.
Exactly, you can do this, but it's really a little bit more detailed, because there's also a rule that doesn't allow you to do that. Right? So it depends on what rules are implemented and not, and obviously that is something. The FAA is in charge of that, like which rules to implement and not, and then the way they should go is they write the requirements, and then SpaceX just puts it in the hardware or in the software, and it should be safe and good.
Okay. Yeah. I want to take a few minutes now to look into the future. I mean, we're all excited about Starship coming on board, hopefully next year, later this year, we're not sure. But when it does, it is a game changer. It is just a huge, for decades, from the beginning of the space, exploration, the space industry, we've always been constrained in mass, and maybe not so much the Soviets, but certainly in the US. With Starship, it kind of relaxes a lot of the systems engineering requirements, where we would think, oh my God, we have to make this half the size, but it's hard to do. Now with Starship, it kind of, I know there are a number of startup companies there, they're saying, how can we make best use of a launch vehicle that can launch so much into LEO, to the moon, and so on. Any thoughts on Starship as in looking into the future?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so its notional payload is 100 tons, basically, right? And you could just take this telescope from Mount Wilson and just put the whole telescope in there.
Yes.
It might be close to 100 tons, but still, that idea is kind of intriguing. Instead of this really difficult, like James Webb, basically, right? And all these things, you can basically put the whole thing in there, and then the mirror is like whatever, 10 inches thick. But who cares? Yeah. I think it will definitely reduce the mass factor in general, but also it's still a big vehicle, right? So even if you're completely reusable and everything, it will still be a major vehicle.
Yes.
I would think that eventually also smaller vehicles will come along, and maybe they have to be reusable completely. Yeah. I think that is the fundamental thing, more than the mass. Is the full reusability is the fundamental thing. The idea of having a rocket and all you pay for the launch, all in quotation marks, is propellant and operations, and that's pretty much it. Or maybe a fraction of the cost. I mean, if you use it 100 times, you pay 100th of the rocket every time. Yeah, no conventional rocket can compete with that.
Yeah,
it's just not going to work anymore.
And you're advising Stoke, which is doing just that. They're doing a upper stage reusable system as well.
Right, and I still see a lot of other rockets that don't look at full reusability, and I wonder what happens with those guys.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Again, we want to leave a few minutes for questions. The human lander system that SpaceX is leading, that's opening up with Starship, Moon as a destination, Moon as doing business on the Moon.
Right.
Any thoughts on how realistic, and is that going to happen? Are we going in that direction?
So SpaceX has had always ambitious plans, I would say. Yeah. And they might not have been done this on the originally projected schedule, but they've also always done it.
Yes.
Right. And so in that sense, I would say, yeah, I think this will happen just eventually. Yeah. And there's a couple challenges along the way. One of them is obviously it has to be actually the reusability part has to work. Yeah. So you have to refill Starship in orbit. That's a part that's also a challenge, in my opinion.
Okay.
So that has to be worked out too. You have to store that propellant over weeks, maybe months. That's challenging too. It's cryogenic propellant, right? And we know what can happen with that. It blows off, and so there's a bunch of things that have to happen in order to be correct, and so I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot of work for SpaceX and by connection also NASA.
Totally.
To make that work.
Real kind of provoking question. If SpaceX and Elon offered you a round trip to Mars, would you go?
I would go. I mean,
and I emphasize round trip.
And it took me a while. Right? I was in the beginning. I would have said no. And even on Dragon, I would have said no. But now I look at Dragon and go, yeah, okay, I think I would do this. Yeah, couple of days on the station would be awesome.
Okay,
right? No
you can afford it.
No joint pains and everything, right? and I'm pretty sure. But then Mars is a pretty long trip. I think it's 2 years, right?
2 years back.
2 years
there and back.
2 years or 3 years. Well, okay, it doesn't matter at that time. Yeah, if you
would need your wife's permission for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that definitely is a bigger commitment.
Well, you didn't say no, so that's it.
Well, I say no. I would say no, but I think if you ask me in a couple of years, I might say yes.
There you go. I love it. And before we open up for questions, just again, I like to look at helping out the next generation, the young engineers. And I like the fact that you started in avionics. People start in many, many different areas, and then they learn, they grow, they expand their horizon. And so any kind of a message of encouragement to young system engineers, rocket scientists out there in terms of space, what is your message?
So I think first of all, systems engineering is just engineering in my world. Yeah, I mean, this is like an extra word on it that doesn't need to be. But I think one thing that I did learn is if you go outside your comfort zone, that is usually a good thing. And that's kind of what I learned along the way. There's a job that I thought I can do this, but I'm not totally sure if I'm really good at that. And I continued and tried that. Like, I mean, totally non-technical. I started these press conferences at one point with NASA, right?
Okay.
And this threw me definitely out of my comfort zone because it's not my language, right? And I have to be really careful what I'm saying, yeah, and so on. And so I started doing that. Then over time, it was actually good. I thought I got some good feedback from people. I also got some other feedback, but it encouraged me to do this more and more. That's part of why I do these things now too, right? It showed me I can bring over the message basically. And so that's why I think I would encourage for sure to go in areas where you not feel comfortable.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
You know, it's like a weird thing, but you want to try it, and then you might find out you've not been comfortable with full right because it was a bad idea, or maybe actually this is the thing that you're actually good at. Yeah.
I want to ask you one more question. We have a few questions here, but the whole topic of risk management,
right.
You've been dealing with that in your job at SpaceX. I personally find that a lot of the startup companies are struggling with that topic, and it's sometimes an afterthought. Sometimes, like mission assurance is not really staffed until much later. Any kind of words of wisdom on just how do you deal with risk management in a startup company?
I mean, it can also slow you down and what's the right word? Freeze you basically in a startup if you really think this through, right? So maybe you actually don't want to look at the risk and its full thing. But on the other side, I mean, obviously, if you're about to launch that car or anything with a person inside,
you better.
or an airplane or so, then you should definitely look at risk. Yeah. So in other words, you should look at what's the worst case that can happen. Yeah. I think that's definitely worth a couple of days of thinking it over. And then if you actually look at your hardware or whatever you're building, software, and you look at it, what can go wrong, then you tend to make it better. Yeah?
Yes.
But if you can also freeze yourself if you think about the risk too much. Yeah. And then you stop driving to work because it's too dangerous.
It seems best if you were informed and make an intelligent decision about which way to go.
I also I always kept on taking risks myself. Yeah? And that's like whether I'm flying or diving or skiing. These are all risks, and you got to learn to manage them and to actually acknowledge them, and then do it anyways. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you think it's worth it, or it's the risk is low in terms of reward. Yeah.
So a few quick questions. How do you select the specific mentees and companies you advise? Is there a criteria that you have?
Yeah, they have to be on the companies. It's easy. They have to be special. Also, I think I'm pretty saturated, right? So I have not a lot of desire, right? I think I'm done with that right now. But they have to be special in a way that I think, oh, this is worth it. Yeah. And in all cases, I thought that actually is true. In terms of mentees, it's a little bit easier in the way that, you know, if it doesn't work out, then you just stop doing a mentor. I don't know. I think in some cases mentees looked at me or searched me basically.
Yeah. How successful would SpaceX have been if space was only private money, no government contracts or support? Could you have done this without NASA or DoD?
No, we did need the customer at the transition from like prototype to a product, right? And the customer is still largely or at that time was largely government. Yeah, it changed a little bit, I think, but at one point you gotta produce a product and money.
Yes.
Right.
So a few questions really quickly here. Can you describe the corporate culture at SpaceX? Are there any exceptional ways how SpaceX is managed? Can you give examples? Just a corporate culture.
It's a little bit longer topic, right?
Yes.
Because it's all inclusive, and I can't quite figure out this was the difference, so that was the difference. Yeah. I mean, there was no acronyms, basically, flat hierarchy, reduced meetings, brevity in general in terms of communication, but good communication overall. There was no office, there was no door, except for finance and for HR. I think so. Yeah. Like I never had an office with a door working at SpaceX.
Well,
yeah, but I got totally used to that. To me, it was natural to sit in the hallway, basically, but so to speak, right?
So an informal, it seems, culture and just can-do attitude and get things done.
Correct. And also so I think if I boil it down to some extent, it's also make decisions, right? when you get asked to make a decision, you make the decision right then, yeah. And that's mostly on Elon's credit, in my opinion, yeah. Elon's make the decision, and if it turns out this was the wrong decision because we learned new things, then we change the decision. Yeah,
Yes.
and this is actually something that I struggle seeing in other companies, or in particular in government organizations. To make a decision is like a big deal.
Yeah.
And it takes too long.
So it's better to make rapid decisions,
Correct.
and if you make a mistake, you change.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank Hans for coming to visit us. Thank you for everybody online for your questions and so on. So please, a round of applause for Hans.
Thank you.
And I will thank you for your time, and you're always welcome here to come and visit us. We'd love to continue.
You got a web page, yeah?
We have a web page. We have food. We have great coffee here, great people. So anytime you want, please join us here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hans.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Louis.